Friends, we are continuing with our AI Journey conference, and I'm confident that you really benefited from today's conference and got some fresh insights. But if you missed something, because we had the parallel sessions, you will be able to see the recorded videos. You can also go to the exhibition of the high-tech solutions in AI. There's a virtual booth of Sber, Intel, Huawei, MTS, SAS, and Rosatom. And right now we are kicking off with a Q&A session. Before we start the Q&A session, I would like to introduce the speakers again. Pradeep Dubey, the Intel Senior Fellow and Director of the Parallel Computing Lab, Darrak Morrissey, Director of Data and AI at Microsoft Worldwide Financial Services, Duijendra Dwivedi, the Head of the Department for AI and IoT Practice, CXP, for EMEA and SAS Institute, Andrei Kurpatov, the Research Head of the Neuroscience and Behavior of the Human Behavioral Lab, the President of the Higher School of the Methodology.
Starting our session now, I would like with an actual question for Pradeep Dubey. The GPT-3 example shows that creating fundamentally new models requires huge computational resources. So the development of AI technologies is beginning to concentrate in the hands of large organizations that have access to such resources. Do you think this trend will change, for example, due to the advent of optical chips or the use of quantum machine learning? Thank you.
No, the technologies like optical photonics or optical I/O or quantum computing, they further raise the bar in terms of technology, which means only fewer and fewer companies who have that technology will be able to participate in AI. That's the quote-unquote little bit of an unfortunate part of AI. It does raise the bar on the computing requirements. On the other hand, pretty much it's really all about data, and data will come from everywhere and anywhere. And so that democratization of the data is probably the thing we need to focus on. And computing will just needs to be rented wherever it is.
Thank you, Pradeep. Second question. There is a forecast that in the future, AI models will increasingly run on AI chips. Do you agree with this prediction? And how do you see the future of AI computing architecture? Thank you.
Yes, so computing models are growing in size. At the same time, the return on that investment is not the same, right? So sooner or later, we will learn how to become much more efficient in terms of improving the quality of the models. And it's not necessarily with just the volume of data, but it's the type of data, right? It's that long tail data, which will be a lot more valuable than just any data. So that is where the focus is soon to be shifting, right? From just simply looking for patterns or the bell shape, the middle part of the curve, to the long tail part of the curve. And that does have implication on the architecture, right? As to how exactly does architecture deal with volume of data, more importantly, the tail latencies of the distribution. And this is where computing focus will shift to, right? More to anomaly processing, more to the tail latency part of it, so that we can become better at looking at anomalous events before they occur and have that predictive power which we currently lack real time.
Pradeep, thank you for your answer.
And that's where I think primarily the focus of computing will shift. It's also going to shift towards making AI much more easy to understand and explain. I mean, humans are not very explainable either. When they write a piece of code, pretty much it's other guy never wants to pick that piece of code. They pretty much want to start from scratch. So humans are not very explainable either. On the other hand, AI does have its challenges today in terms of not being able to understand and explain its decisions. And that's going to be the second self-limiting thing if we don't address it. And ethics is kind of part of it. If we understand things better, we'll be able to put our value equations in there as well.
Pradeep, thank you for your answer. Dear speakers, if during our session you want to supplement the answer to any of questions, please, we'll be happy to provide you with such an opportunity. For now, let's move to the next question. Darah Morrissey. I have two questions. Hi. What is the interest in responsible AI? And who are the stakeholders in your customers who care? Thank you.
First off, it's fantastic to be at the event today, and thank you for giving me the opportunity. At Microsoft, we can see that responsible AI is really hot right now. As you look at the Gartner Magic Quadrant for emerging technology, it's actually right up at the peak, as well as being there with explainable AI. So it was kind of surprising for me to see it at that, because it's not a shiny new technology like 5G or quantum. But I think the reason it's there is that the impact of AI is so big, and with great power comes great responsibility. And in my customers, we get huge interest at the CEO level in terms of responsible AI, and also then with the governance decision makers like the Chief Risk Officer, Chief Information Security Officer, where privacy is involved. Because we have seen incidents where AI has gone wrong, or AI is being blamed for incidents that cause reputational risk to a bank. So no CEO wants to be on the headline news with something that happened in terms of they're applying the technology. So when I think about the roles, it's really those governance decision makers in their banks are really interested. But everyone is interested. All the employees, every employee in an organization is also vested, because they're all representing the company in some way.
Thank you, Darah. And second question is, how do you see the technology evolving to drive responsible AI?
Yeah, I think Pradeep made some great points actually on how the technology is evolving. When you think about some of the things that we can do now around explainable AI, we've actually gone in the last couple of years from just laying out principles to actually giving you the ability to use technology to do explainable AI. At Microsoft, we're taking the approach that we need to learn on this journey together with our customers. A lot of the tooling that we've built out at Microsoft Research, we're actually making it available to the whole community to use, as well as putting it into our first-party platforms. I think the technology is going to evolve as we look at things like machine learning ops, which is the AI equivalent of DevOps. And what we're doing there is really helping you automate the supply chain of how you build an end-to-end A2I model. Typically what happens is a data scientist might build it, hand it off to production, data might be fed into that model. With MLOps, we can actually automate a lot of the processes here. We can track all of the changes that are happening both to the data and the model. And I think that's a kind of really exciting development. I also think that we're going to see more innovation in some of those types of AI that are more challenging to explain. So when you think about deep learning, for example, that's really challenging. As you make AI more explainable, you actually lose some of the power of things like deep learning. So I think we're going to see more innovation there. And I also think quantum as well is going to actually be important. We're going to have to be able to explain what quantum is doing, but I can also see quantum helping us make AI explainable as well. So I think it's going to be really exciting. And again, this is a journey that I think we're learning and learning from our customers from all the time, and our partners.
Thank you, Darah. And we are moving to next question to Duijera Duivedi. Duijera, how do you think, will AI always be biased on the extent that the society that created it is biased?
It's difficult to, if I understand the question, why we need to think that AI will be biased. To answer that question, AI will not be biased. If you look at AI, the way we implement AI, the journey starts with the data. Journey starts with the data bias. Journey starts with the modeling bias, decisioning bias. And there are, in this entire journey, there are many factors and there are many stakeholders who provide the data, and the people who are going to implement the decisions, and the people who are going to monitor the impacts and realize the benefits of AI. So this entire journey, the biases could be contributed by in any leg if we don't, look into it. So it could not be by design. It could be, just by the way we are experimenting. We might have, if we are doing a sampling, we might have picked certain very biased sample to start with. I would not say that, AI is always, biased. We need to look at from the perspective of from data to decisioning, where the bias could have been introduced into the system, and the society piece. It's a debatable question, basically, that whether the society that created it is biased or not. That's a debatable piece. But focusing more on the AI piece, the bias could have been inherently introduced by by the way it is designed, by the way the experiment is designed, by the way data is fed into the AI systems, by the way models are developed, or by the way that we are implementing it on the top of decisioning. So I think this is what this entire journey needs to be tracked. This entire journey needs to be investigated, and we need to have our own checklist. We need to have our own processes. So we need to work with our customers to understand these biases, potential biases, inherent biases, and we need to work it out. There is no simple remedy for this. These sources could be very different depending upon the type of industry and the type of data we are dealing with. Whether the data is on edge, whether the data is on on cloud, or wherever it is, we need to look at the entire journey, and we need to have our own checklist. We need to have our own remedy for this.
Thank you, Dwijendra. I have a second question. Today, AI is starting to accompany us everywhere. He observes us, analyzes, and collects data. Even if ideal ethical principles are the heart of his work, is there a high risk that people who lack such principles can control and direct AI in their work? For example, corrupt officials or attackers who have gained success to it. Shouldn't, in your opinion, this fact become a reason to limit the introduction of AI into our lives? Thank you.
So it's very difficult to limit the role of AI, and it could be a double-edged sword, definitely. I can give an example. Like, if I am looking at satellite imagery data, I can use the same data to track the areas where there is a huge movement, the areas where there are a good number of clusters that have come up suddenly, and so on. And the same images could be used by the security agencies to track what is unwanted into that area and what unwanted development has happened. So basically, the same technology can be used for the good and for the worse. It's very difficult to if I understand, it's very difficult to control it in our lives. Starting from the way the whole infrastructure is moving to cloud, and the AI machine learning adoption to cloud, data on cloud, and the way it is progressing, I don't think the way in the world of APIs, millions of APIs getting created every day, whether they are providing data services or decisioning services or model services, it's very difficult to limit AI into our lives. I don't see there is any way doing that. What we could have done is, and this is where there is a huge gap. If you look into a bank, the banks have a very well defined of all types of risk. credit risk, market risk, operational risk, concentration risk, reputation risk. You name the type of risk, and there are a fairly standard definitions and fairly standard way of dealing with this, and which is accepted by whether the U.S. regulators or whether the ECB or any regulator. But if you look at AI risk, there are more than 20 to 24 different types of regulations, whether it's IEEE regulations, whether it's ECB regulations, AI for, and this creates a lot of challenges because it makes life very difficult for the people who actually understand them and make it they are responsible for implementing this in the organizations. So I think we need to make the somebody has to unify all these regulations, come up with what is AI risk, how do we measure it, how do we control it, how do we manage it, and need to have some standards around it. As an AI practitioner, when I look at 22 to 24 different types of recommendations, I sometimes get lost. So I think yes. Organizations needs to do a better job in the same way like we have risk AI regulators, compliance AI regulator, risk regulators, compliance regulators. We need AI regulators. We need to create these roles in the organizations who could do AI audit. These roles does not exist. We need an AI auditor who will make sure that the software development life cycle and the implementation cycles are actually aligned with the standard ethical practices driven by the best agencies. So these roles have to come up, and they need to make sure that these the implementations and the developments are as per the standards. But I don't see there is any way to limit the the introduction of AI into our lives. This is a very difficult hypothesis to think of, believe, work on it. And look at in the COVID areas, post-COVID areas, the types of frauds that the banks are facing, the types of cyber identity, this is increasing day by day. The number of attempts of identity theft, account takeover, fraud in a bank has increased 3 times in most of the surveys in last 6 to 9 months. So people are using these technologies, and I think the organizations will have to improve their AI processes to meet up with those challenges. This is something that had been, going on for a long time, and I don't think this will stop in the near future. It's difficult. So probably we need to improve ourselves to manage some of those risks. That's how I see it.
Wow. To Jendra, thank you so much. It was really impressive and interesting. Next question will be for Gary Bratsky. Gary, hi.
Hello.
Hi. The question is, there are different views on the issues of the structure of our thinking. Someone believes that the brain is just a machine, and someone endows our thinking of component of free will, which is necessary when making creative decisions. What do you think? If AI as a machine is deprived of free will it be able to create something really new? Thank you.
I've from robotics, and I actually have a background in studying the brain. I argue with a lot of conventional wisdom. There were experiments showing that you'd already made a decision before you were aware of it. That was shown to be wrong. It was an error in how they were processing the data. And when you correct for that, it shows that what you would intuit when you make a decision, your sense of free will actually aligns exactly with your brain processes. When you make a decision, you become aware and you change your behavior. There's a larger issue, and you'd have to go into physics and whatever about determinism. So I believe that determinism just doesn't exist in our universe, and it has a lot to do with there are no boundary conditions actually in our universe, and and so even from like a Newtonian sense, we're not in a determined universe, but it just gets worse when you consider fundamentals of physics, like where limits in communication speed, limits in there's no clock in our universe. Time runs differently in different areas. And so determinism just doesn't exist. So in making an AI system, for what we do now, the paths that an AI takes will depend on the learning that you give it, it depends on how you construct the mind. So I'd say, like, to me, the mind is based on top of a causal model, and that influences everything you see and do, and it also limits the nature of the mind. We're not going to have infinite minds. We're not going to be able to ever understand, really, too much beyond what our causal models to the world give you. So I don't know that machines are going to be deprived of free will any more than we are in the world by your own experiences. It'll depend on this interplay. For very constrained situations, there might be a kind of determinism where you want to stamp out anything free, such as like examining parts in a factory. But for an organism in the environment, like, they couple immediately to the entire environment, indirectly, and this entire environment is not deterministic. So neither will those AIs that are out in the world. If we create an intelligent species that are, going out to the planets or something, they're going to interact, and their interactions with us, and there'll be no determinism there. There'll be path dependencies that ultimately, they aren't grounded in any deterministic system, but they're coupled into the environment that they interact with. They're coupled back to us who might have sent them out, and so I do think we will be able to create minds once we understand this. I also think we'll, so the AI today is more, you could say it's more stuck in being a associator or function approximator, even though this is done very vastly, like GDP3, it essentially, there's no there, and it can make very stupid mistakes because it really is operating off of really no internal model. But I do believe that these principles are there in which we can make a mind that will be free and act in its own sense. We just need a few more of these steps. I think a lot of this will come from robotics. I don't know if that's an answer to the question.
Gary, it was excellent answer, really. Just believe me. Gary, I have a second question. How do you feel about the idea of symbiosis between humans and AI, when AI integrates with human thinking, becoming its continuation and additional resources of a brain?
So I feel great. There's different roles people can take in the world, and I just decided I'm going to take the technical optimist role. I don't worry about AI taking us over or destroying us. There are real worries, and they occur more in the biases that lock in or might disadvantage populations. But those are the real practical worries. But first of all, when you create an AI, you're going to create a fundamentally different kind of brain, because we evolved to operate in this world as simians, and we have all kinds of baggage that essentially politicians and people hack the human brain for their purposes, and the AI won't necessarily have these aggression and great leader biases. They'll have other biases, of course. But I think, for me, the general view is we can't do AI fast enough. For example, people worry about the population, have been worrying about the population problem. But when you really look at the demographics, the problem of humanity on Earth is the population. We won't have enough people, not enough young people, because the rate of the birth rates have been falling all over the world, and this has happened drastically in China, and it's happening in India. It's like India and Africa are the last young populations left, but they don't have the infrastructure to make like the impact China had. And when they build them out, as China did, it's a 20-year journey. By then they'll be old too. So I think we need the AI. I think it's critical for human survival. I don't worry that this is going to do something terrible to humanity, because humanity is almost defined as being a technology creating species. And if that is going to lead to our doom, well, who cares? Like, we were built that way, and so let's die that way. But if not, then we actually can't get this technology fast enough, because there are so many problems: global warming, energy production, even restoring the environments in many places, getting more sustainable, replacing human labor. We just can't get this fast enough. If somehow AI finally turns on us and becomes a destructive destroyer, well, in some sense we succeeded, right? Because we've created something with agency that can live by itself and it doesn't like us. I think it's very unlikely. The more likely scenario, if we create other species of intelligence, is they'll just be indifferent to us in some way that's destructive. But I just don't see this. I do see that, like, the human species is going to change, and it'll be partly symbiosis and partly launching off of different intelligences, if we survive at all. I'd rather be on the survival side, which is on, humanity's going to change. We can and should augment ourselves. Humans have many, health problems anyhow that could be fixed. In some simple ways, like feedback problems in the brain cause many maladies, and those are easy to fix. And so, an AI can determine this and turn on and off, errant feedback systems. So, I guess the story is I'm not worried about it, and we can't do it fast enough.
Gary, thank you very much. It was really interesting to hear you, really. It was amazing. And next question for Andrei Kurpatov. Andrei, добрый вечер.
Andrei, good evening. I would like to ask you several questions. The first one, where do you think is the boundary, and how do you abide by the boundary between the humans and artificial intelligence? I think the boundary is so insurmountable that you don't really need to abide by this boundary. It's going to enforce itself. Our problem is that we treat artificial intelligence as a living organism, in this mass consciousness that is treated as a semblance of humans. And actually, it's never going to get a soul. It's never going to be dying. These are all, fantasies. In fact, this is all about the machine intelligence. And in my talk, I said that the emergence of AI is leading everyone to an illusion. It's deluding everyone. AI it's algorithms, and if these algorithms can become a living creature, at some point, I don't really. I'm in agreement with Gary. This cannot really happen, and our human brain is not really arcane. It's a set of algorithms made out of robots. It's a biological phenomenon. As for a machine intelligence, it is built on completely different mechanisms, completely distinct from human intelligence. It seems to us that we are reproducing something similar to human human brain, but if you have a modicum of understanding of what the functioning of the real brain is, and if you understand what is happening in artificial intelligence these days, you will instantly appreciate that these are different orders of organization of complexity. So I don't really see any boundaries in I don't see any problems with the boundaries. I see problems with stupidity. People will need to understand that AI tools are means to an end. Yes, they need to be controlled, but you need to control the people that use and develop AI. Thank you very much, Andrei, for a great answer. I think it's very correct. I think it's going to be put to good use by a lot of citizens of our country. And I'm going to pass over to the next question. How do you think we can preserve these cognitive skills on the part of humans? Well, this is the largest problem on the agenda. When the machines are getting smarter, the people are getting dumber. And all these digital technologies are actually leading to an atrophy of the brain. Making decisions is becoming complicated. This digital consumption can lead to algorithms making decisions instead of us. We're not really choosing whether we are reading. We are consuming pretty primitive content, and we are living in this sort of spiral of dumbing down, decrease of intellectual capabilities. And this is not, you can't really stop this by relying on common sense of individuals, because people are weak. They are prone to fall to the simpler things, to the easier things. Any work is really an encumbrance, and even if people simply exist, they find it going great. So I think that this is a global problem, really. The dumbing down and the degradation of institutions, that's a major problem. Society rests on institutions. They underpin the society. It's not the brain of individuals. It's not the interactions, it's the institutions. Two problems. We are dumbing down and we don't know how to self-organize in this new techno world. But how do you preserve these cognitive skills? That's the worry on everyone's mind. And also, Andrei, if you can speak a bit closer to the microphone, because you disappear at times. Well, I am in the mountains. I'm not using a connection that's all that great, so I can't really help this. So what do we do as humans, as mankind? What do we do as the mankind that is getting increasingly lazy? Reading simpler things, doing simpler tasks, not overburdening the brain with complicated tasks. We are degrading, all right, but how do you reverse this trend? Well, generally it happens that it all caves in, it all stops working, and the number of civilizations that simply died out, that's, those numbers are in the dozens, and we have all the chances to dumb down completely and not to cope with the technological base that we develop ourselves. And if we speak about individual humans, then I guess we just need to evolve as humans. I am in Greece. They put together a wonderful set of philosophical theories. I actually referred to one of them when I started my talk. But people can make a conscious effort to work, to self-organize. If you ask a global question, then yes, we are in a downward trend in terms of our cultural evolution and emergence of new people that manufacture, that generate this culture. We don't seem to have this internal coil spring. Andrei, you can listen to you for hours, as the previous speakers, whom I would deeply like to thank. We are pressed for time. Time is at a premium. So I'm deeply thankful to you for the time that you gave. Believe me, this is an incredibly important set of answers that you have been giving. They make us think, they provide a lot of food for thought, and I hope that all the viewers and listeners will be able to draw the relevant conclusions for themselves.
Thank you, colleagues, for interesting interviews and speaking. Thank you.
Dear speakers, thank you very much for your responses and your contribution to the AI journey. Together we have been creating this wonderfully important platform to exchange experience, and hopefully we're going to contribute to the development of this area as a whole. Hopefully we're going to be able to see you again, and now we are wrapping up the mainstream. The thematic streams are still continuing apace, and we would like to thank our partners again. Thanks to this joint effort, we were able to put together a very interesting program, and we were able to assemble internationally recognized speakers. We're infinitely grateful to Intel that has been supporting the conference with the fullest hardware and software solutions for AI. Huawei, a leading provider of ICT infrastructure and smart devices that is driving the availability and affordability of technology. MTS, the leading Russian company in digital media and telecommunications services. SAS, our partner, at whose stand you can get a consultation and look at the most recent applications in the 4 rankings of AI. Rosatom, that unites over 400 outfits in the Russian nuclear industry, machine building and construction, and is one of the global tech leaders. The Russian Direct Investments Fund, a partner of the forum that attracted $2 billion to fund companies that specialized in artificial intelligence technologies. And we are thankful to Teradata, a partner of the Business Day. Tomorrow is the final day of the conference. We are going to be launching the regional marathon of the leading experts in AI from Vladivostok to Kaliningrad, the length of Russia. AI Journey is the title of the 3rd day for middle school and high school. The program is aiming to popularize DS and AI technologies among the young generation. And AI Journey and AI Junior Day will be attended by the leading Russian and international experts in artificial intelligence and data science. And also tomorrow we're going to be summing up the competition in data science and AI with the overall prize fund of several million rubles. Thank you very much for your participation. It was your activity that helped to make AI Journey ever more contentful and ever more interesting. Thank you very much, and see you tomorrow, and have a good night.